All right, welcome back. My name is Sean, and in today's video, we're going to cover something that I think is being on the collective consciousness of most coaches, consultants, experts, creators, and really the personal brand space in general, which is how do you build a personal brand, a presence in a world that is just infested with AI? I think the big problem right now is that because of AI, because of the dawn of it, because of the infestation of a lot of AI into the content creation process, it is creating a scenario where people are now coming across or struggling to come across very authentic, unique, different. They're struggling to resonate with our audiences. They're sounding like everyone else. And so in this video, what I want to cover is really, well, what is the problem? What's happening currently from my observation and my standpoint, and where I have obviously seen a lot of things, being a chief client officer at FounderWest, which was a marketing education company, helping people grow, build, and monetize personal brands. We're then also going to cover content fluency and why that is, I think, the inception, or rather the catalyst for this becoming a problem. And we're going to talk about why the game hasn't really changed. Really, only the tools have, and we'll go through some of this here. And then we'll start going through some insights, which the insights are just, how would I say, solutions to the problem. And so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 insights here. And these insights, I guess, are the antidote to the issues that I will explain in this video today. And so if you're watching, I would encourage you to grab a tea like I have here. Tea is just life at this point, especially on cold days like this. But if you grab yourself a tea, a drink, whatever it may be, I would hope that this is going to be very valuable, because my whole entire goal for this video today is that I really want to help you zig into being more human, right? So that you can separate yourself from the majority of personal brands out there. Because at the end of the day, I think all we want to be able to do is build a personal brand that is unmistakably you, magnetic, resonant, so that you can't be copied. People are drawn to you in your world. People want to buy from you, and create content that feels authentic and unique. And so really, if we jump into it, before we jump into it, actually, I just want to mention, if you want to just go skip ahead to any of the insights, you're more than welcome to, because you know, at the end of the day, these insights can all be taken in their own form. They don't inherently all connect to each other. So you're more than welcome to just go straight there, have fun, and go take and rip. I will say, though, that like these will not make sense unless you do kind of like follow along on the context. But let's talk about what's happening, because like I said, working at FounderWest, which was a marketing education company built on the back end of one of the most largest personal brands in the space, what I've seen, and what I've seen since like the dawn, probably I think it's about 2 years ago, since like the inception of AI becoming mainstream in the content creation world, is when that started to happen, I think what I began to see is that it was a very exciting time. I think a lot of people started wearing AI as a badge of honor. It was a lot of people were creating, how would you say, Claude projects that was like, hey, Claude, you know, be my content writer, be my newsletter script writer, be this, be that. Now, I think that was great at the time. I do think, though, that since the introduction of all these tools into the space, particularly, you know, coaches, consultants, experts, creators, all of us who are creating content as a form of getting our voice out there, fighting irrelevancy, and really trying to stand out and, you know, bring attention to ourselves so that we can help people. What I've started to notice is that there's been this consequence or domino effect of really negative things, I would say. I wouldn't say they're negative because they're not necessarily intentional, but really what I've got here is just a series of things I've started to notice since that point. And, you know, what I'll do is I want to go through them because I think they're important. And so one of the first things that I've started to notice is that I think, and this is probably something that a lot of people have started to notice as well, is that amongst the content creation space and a lot of people who are now creating content, coaches, consultants, creators, experts, what's happening is that a lot of people are creating content that looks the same, but it looks different, but it feels the same. And I think the problem here is that a lot of the content is now becoming generic. It's becoming muted. It's becoming a little bit more unrelatable. And I think the reason that that's happening is that a lot of the same information is really just being said by different faces. And it's creating more of a noisy space. And it's also creating a situation where people are struggling to stand out. And I think the reason this has happened is the second observation that I've got, which is what we're now seeing since AI has now entered the content creation space is that the information layer itself is now being commoditized. And what I mean by that is now, if you're a coach, consultant, creator, expert, and you're trying to basically grab attention or gain attention through the art of like how-tos and frameworks and stuff like this, it's no longer a competing factor. What you know is now not really an advantage in the sense that now everyone can access the same information. Everyone can say the same things because AI now has basically lowered the barrier to entry to content creation. And so really what's inherently happening is now because everyone has access to the same information and now everyone can really create content that is just information, no one's inherently standing out. Everyone sounds the same. And I think what's inherently happening is that because no one's standing out, everyone sounds the same, no one's listening, and therefore there's this lack of resonance. And so really the beautiful part here though is that it's kind of freeing in a way, because the solution here, which we can get to eventually in our insights, is that you want to add context to the information to actually have any value to it. And so we'll go through things like that, but this is just an observation that I've had, which is the information layer now itself is now commoditized. And what that is inherently leading to is that because now we have this information layer that's inherently commoditized, the easy default for a lot of creators, a lot of coaches, consultants, etc., is to post how-tos, it's to post frameworks. And I think what's happened is everyone's been conditioned to do this. And what inherently has happened, like we already said, is that it's just costing people because they're building a brand that's just based on information, not really on substance. And when you build a brand that's purely just on information, and it's just purely about how-tos and frameworks and everything like this, you don't really stand out. And like I said, you don't build a brand of substance. And what happens when you don't build a brand of substance, this is another observation that I've inherently had when I've sort of witnessed the inception of AI into the content creation space, is that because you're just selling information and your whole brand is about just selling information itself, what happens is that you inherently can't compete with people who have like real substance to their brands. And so what that means is that if you want to have substance to your brand, it's because you basically want to have connection, you want to have stories, you want to stand for something. And those brands that have those, they will outcompete, my belief is they will outcompete those brands who do not. Because the brands that do not, they are forced, in my opinion, to basically compete on price, guarantees, and promises, because there's nothing else to compete on. And I think the challenge here for most people in this space when we're building our personal brands is that the inherent idea is we're trying to install our beliefs and values into our products and content so that we can attract other people with those same beliefs and values. Because at the end of the day, if we do that, we inspire and we captivate and we resonate with the audience versus just educating them. Because I think what I'm seeing is that a lot of people are just becoming like dictionaries, you could say, right? Dictionaries are useful for a period of time, but then you basically just disregard them. Versus, a lot of people I think would resonate with the idea that brands that are in putting story and putting values and having something to stand for, it's like watching Netflix, it's like watching your favorite movie. It's like, there's something to captivate to, it's something that you're loyal to, it's something you always go back to. And so I think there's this massive split that's happened because of this, where you have people there's people that are convincing others to buy their stuff and to be part of their world. And then there's those that are inspiring. And those that are inspiring, I think, are the ones who are doing the best job of not only are they giving amazing how-tos and teaching people, which is the whole point of content, right? I think a side note is that the whole point of content, the whole point of creating content is that you're trying to create from this deep-seated place of empathy. And what I mean by that is that you're trying to hold the audience's needs and wants in higher esteem than yours. And then you're trying to create content, materials to help them more than your paid stuff will. Because at the end of the day, it's my belief that all of your paid stuff will help people, but your free stuff will help people more than any of your paid stuff will. And so if you hold this goal of being able to then basically put effort into it, but also have this sense of resonance in it, have a sense of like, how would you say, connection, stories, and something to stand for, you will inspire versus convince. And I think that's the whole entire point, because then you will resonate with the audience. So this is more or less, what I think is happening. I think what the reason that this is happening, and I think this is more important than anything, is that the reason that you have this situation where everything looks different but feels the same, people are noticing. I think the reason that you have, brands that are just like selling more information, etc., and it's not working, and the reason that people that are, not really selling with it, they're not selling with substance, and they're struggling to monetize because it's more there's a hyper competitiveness in the market now. The reason this is happening, I think, is because of content fluency. I think the thing that most coaches, consultants, or anyone who sells anything on the internet has to realize is that your consumers, the market itself, are becoming more sophisticated. They can tell what is AI, they can tell what is generated with AI, and those people who are sophisticated buyers, they are starting to clock it and they are starting to notice. And I think because there's more an attunement to content that is created inauthentically, that is generated with AI, or is just a rehashed version of what someone else has said with no context, no story, no belief, no nothing to stand against or stand for, those people are switching off. They're moving away from these brands that are purely based on how-tos and teaching and all of this easy default. And what they're now gravitating towards, in my opinion, is brands and personal brands with story. It's with context, it's with emotion. And so really, I think the whole entire game here now is that we want to like invigorate our content with those things, which we will go through. But to just even add on the point, one of the most interesting things that I personally found in researching all of these different things is that the 2025 word of the year amongst most dictionaries, it was mainly two, but this was the kind of nerdy shit that I get up to in my spare time, frankly, is both Merriam-Webster and the Macquarie dictionary. AI and AI slop were literally the top words of the year. And I think it's just a reflection of where we are in this content landscape. And I think where it inherently leads us is that people are becoming slowly more attuned to content that is generated with AI, because everyone is becoming more content fluent, because it is a large part of our life. And I think people are now having a visceral reaction to content that feels inauthentic, that's not real, that's not truly an expression of the person on the other side. And so where we've kind of like then landed, I think, is that people want to hear from people, right? I think to resonate with sophisticated buyers is that they have to resonate with the world. And really, if you want to build a world, it has to be built upon you. And so really, when we start to think about it, if you're kind of like myself and you're in this space and everything like this, right? If you are selling what you know in the form of courses, coaching, consulting, masterminds, I think the big part now is that because the information layer has been commoditized, because everyone can say what it is that you also say, and because and everything that's been said has already been said, the way that we now have to like stand out is we need to like let story and personality flow through the content. We want to like tap into uniqueness. We want to tap into beliefs. We want to tap into like who we actually are. And I think the other part is we want to build unique characters. Now, I've had a conversation with a few people about building unique characters, and I think this is just a little side note, is that I had a lady who I'm working with, and it's something that I mentioned to her where I think building unique characters is actually something that would do her good because she's in a very hyper competitive niche. It's a very saturated market, and she kind of reflected back to me that it felt inauthentic. But my answer to her on the building unique characters, I think it's just more pulling the more of the expression of you out and then formulating it so you can actually, on a recurrent basis, communicate it with more intention. Because at the end of the day, you're doing a market a service by communicating you through your own unique character. And we'll get through to unique characters because it's actually the last insight, which is building a defensible character. And so you can skip to it if you need. But the whole entire point here, right, is that people are now getting it. People know what is authentic and what is not. People know if you're just rehashing other people's words and ideas and thoughts, especially if you're just copying other people's not formats, because like formats are quite evergreen and everyone's kind of like leaning into it. But the idea is that people are becoming more and more attuned to what is truly authentic and what is not. And what used to be authentic was being competent and knowing different things. But I think what's now happening is because everyone now can seem competent to really stand out and be authentic and be unique, I think it now takes a little bit more of a step further. But I wouldn't even actually say that. I take that back because I think it's not really a step further. I think it's really just playing the game that we should have all been playing in the first place. And I'll go through that because it's actually my point here, right? Which is the game hasn't changed. It's really only the tools. I think that the thing that I've wanted to kind of also push in this video, if you're watching, is that I don't want to push this idea that this is anti-AI and everything like this, because I don't want to necessarily promote being like a Luddite and not using it, because AI in the use of content creation is extremely useful, and we'll actually even go through that in this part here. But the idea is that the tools have changed. The tools are existing. They will exist. They are amazing for the use of and an integration of into workflows. But I think the game really is always been the same, which is you want to do content built on a unique character. You want to invite people into a world. You want to serve them and get better at it and get better at it. And you want to create from a deep-seated place of empathy and experience, right? You want to basically ask, what is it that I know that only I can say? And so that forces you to actually then start to add context and, like we've been saying before, stories, analogies, experiences into your content. Because at the end of the day, what we're really trying to do is, number one, trying to be uniquely ourselves in content. We're trying to also then serve the audience in a way that we can also then connect with them. So we can have shared beliefs and shared values, but also through information that moves people closer to their goals, closer to their outcomes, solve problems for them. Because like I said before, your content it will affect way more people than any of your paid stuff will. And so with this being said, with it being said that, the observations are everything's looking and feeling the same. Everyone's teaching frameworks. Everyone, information is no longer like a moat in any way, shape, or form. And what's happening is like those brands that are really just building their brands off like education and teaching people stuff. And also like, why is that and they're selling without substance, without any stories, without any, nothing to stand for. Really where that leads us, and the question that becomes is, well, how do I escape a world that is producing a mass amount of content that is very much AI generated, that is not even AI generated, but how do I step out uniquely as myself in an original way and get people to lean in when there is so many other people that can say what you can say? And I think what I've got here with my different insights is what I believe the antidote to this is. I think if you want to create a personal brand that is uniquely you, that is authentic, that stands out, that, brings people into a world, that gets people to lean in and, invariably also buy your stuff and get connected to you as a human, I believe these insights will serve useful to you. And so the first one that I've got here, and I think this is a massive one that I, in retrospect, having taught this process so many times to people in my previous work, the first one is like creation is sacred. And so really what I've got here is that the content creation process, and I think everyone's probably aware of this, is that the content creation process is ideation, creation, packaging, distribution, and tracking. And this is something that I've taught many, many times. My point here, and from my observation, is that again, it's not about being a Luddite and not using AI. You want to use AI across everything else except creation. And what I mean by that is that in ideation, in packaging, in distribution, and tracking, I think AI is immensely useful. It is like powerful beyond measure. And like even for myself, like I'll even be the first person to say, like with ideation, I personally use it as my sparring partner, right? Like I feed it my philosophy, I feed it my client stories, I give it my client problems. I talk about it in different ways to really get different angles to sort of like be able to really express different ideas in different ways that feel powerful to me and be able to like, find content ideas that will resonate with the ICP and the person that I really want to connect with, which is hopefully you on the other side of this video. And so in terms of ideation and being able to find like content ideas and be able to spar with it, that's like a perfect use for AI. And I think in additional, like in packaging, hooks, titles, thumbnails, captions, CDAs, totally use AI in that context as well. Even for me, right, one of the processes that I've got and the way I think about it is I go for long 30-minute walks. I will then voice memo everything that I know about a topic or an angle that I've basically done sparring or ideation sparring with AI. So it might be like, for example, this whole entire video here, just as an example, right? I basically sparred with AI around what could be the most relevant thing that we could talk about. I then basically came the idea of like, well, personal branding, AI-infested world, how do you separate and stand out? I went for a large walk. I spoke to it for 30, 40 minutes. And then I got AI to basically take my words and put it into a nice, beautiful doc that I could walk through for you guys. And so that's an example of like packaging. Another thing that you can use it for is distribution. I saw a really fucking cool thing on Instagram where the guy had created a software. I wish I actually saved the video because I didn't save the video, but he created a software where you could go, he recorded 8 reels, he uploaded it to a platform, a piece of software that was built with AI, he vibe coded it. And then it basically went and scheduled all those reels, but even better, it added captions that were AI generated. So basically like what you would write in the captions. So like comment X, get Y. I'm still half and half about, comment X, get Y in some respects, but it created the captions, it created the subtitles. It also created the headline for the actual piece of content, which was really cool. And then it scheduled it at the most perfect optimized time. That's an amazing use of AI. That is an amazing use of like an intelligent tool that can really just help you like promote and like get things done quicker. And even to the extent of also synthesizing the data and telling what's landing, I think it's a really good use of AI. And so the point that I'm making here in this insight is that yes, you can basically go and build systems around the creation process, right? So around the actual creation of like that, you can build everything around that can be a system. But with the creation process itself, I think you want to create space for it. You don't want to get AI to just go and create the content itself. You want it to be an expression of you. You want to be able to create like a space in your day. You don't want it to be like a thing that is, just another thing to tick off in your like to-do list. And really, I think, I'll talk about this because I think it's important. I've written it down here, systemized content creation. The biggest problem that I've seen with the introduction of AI into content is that AI went from a creative act to a systemized one. And I think the reason that that happened is that the entrepreneurs, the coaches, the consultants, the experts, the people that were using AI at the I think before it became mainstream in content creation, they built successful businesses on the back of doing things like systemizing their business across client ops, financing, marketing, all these different things. And then inherently what they did is they took something that it was more of a creative process and then they systemized it. And then what inherently happened is content just became this thing they tick off the list. And then really what inherently happened is I think that led to this place of like content just getting put in a bucket and getting really without any soul of authenticity, it just got pushed out. And so I think an antidote to that is that you want to create it has to be sacred. I think content creation has to be sacred. You have to be able to allow your voice to speak through in whatever way, shape, or form you can. And you don't want to let AI create content for you. If you're writing on LinkedIn, you want to write your LinkedIn posts. If you're writing newsletters, you want to write those. If you're creating YouTube videos, don't get a YouTube scriptwriter. Go and actually use voice memos. It's even something that we'll talk about it here. Speak it, don't type it. And so that's insight one, which is the point that, content creation is a sacred process, and I think it should be kept that way. But I do think everything around it can be enabled by AI to make it more efficient and faster and allow you to push what it is that you know in a faster way. And I think one of the cool things that you should do if you're watching this is you want to go read Creative Act by Rick Rubin. I think it's a really great book that would definitely serve you. And I definitely has served me. It's a great book. The other thing I want to share, and I think this is a large one that I've started to try to adopt myself, and as someone who's trying to wrangle with this issue and problem myself, is that to sort of survive in a world where everyone else can say the same, what you want to do is you want to tell stories only you can tell. What I believe is that if you can start to tell all of the how-tos, the frameworks, and all the things that you want to teach, but you can say it in such a way where you add context, such as client stories, your own business stories, your own emotions, experiences, etc., and you add context to that information, you then end up in a place where if you ask the question, am I the only person who can say this? The answer becomes yes. Because if, as an example, we look here, here's how to monetize a personal brand versus I worked with 500 plus personal brands and added 10 to 20K a month to them. Here's what actually worked. There is a distinct difference there in just being able to teach information in terms of how to monetize a personal brand, which is like, anyone could go and say, yeah, you just like go and add CTAs, you go and have a, conversion process, have lead magnets, make sure there's an email series on the back end, make sure that your offer stack in terms of each level of the CTA that you're leading people through has a, what is the next offer, next offer until it's like book a call and sell them on your thing. Instead, you can actually go and root that in story, root it in a client story, root it in all the things that you've seen. And it just adds this element where you then become the only person that can tell and that can share that. I saw a really good Instagram reel the other day, which is here's the 10 hooks that got me over like 50 million views versus here's how to get more views on your content. There's like a massive difference there. And so if you want to kind of take an exercise that I've started to do personally, is what I really would, recommend, and just as an exercise to start to go through this, is you can do like a 5-year reflection and a 1-week reflection. So this is really where you sit down, you think about all the mistakes, the lessons, the core outcomes, the amazing insights, etc., from the last 5 years in your life and the things that you've done, either in the 5 years or in the 1 week. And then what you'll do is you'll pull stories and you'll pull ideas and context from your life that inherently you can actually add to the things that you want to teach. And so for me personally, right, I can sit here and I can look back at my 18 months to 2 years with Founder OS and pick up on so many client stories that I can invariably tell. I can talk about all the different outcomes that I've provided for people and how that happened. And so I think this is a really beautiful way to actually start to stand out in your content, and it allows you to then distinctly be different from others in the space because no one else will have the stories that you can tell. No one else will be able to add the context that you can add. And so that's the insight too that I think is really useful. The other one, and I won't go through this because I've kind of mentioned it, you know, my thesis, at least on the reason I think, my thesis on the reason like AI has sort of enabled this like manifestation of this AI-infested world, right? The reason I think that, it has happened is AI really reduced, AI lowered the barrier of entry to content because I think the highest barrier to entry to content was writing content. Because at the end of the day, content is primarily written and it always was. And so, what I believe now to be true is that because we now have tools like voice memos and we have tools like whisper flow, and because AI can now interpret what we say, what I think is now a way beautiful way of doing things is that instead of getting AI to just basically write our stuff because we were so used to it being able to just write for us because we were predominantly had friction to writing, we can now actually just speak instead of writing. And so, what I would implore anyone, if you're watching this, go out for a walk, pick one idea, whether you source that from other people that you see, or you basically find a story in your life or like a client story that you want to talk about. And I would go for a 30-minute walk, use voice memos, and really just talk about the problem in such a way that you were writing an essay about it. And what you'll find is that you'll actually be able to like condense, because we speak faster than we type, you'll be able to condense so much information into a short amount of period of time. And you'll be able to then find a place where you can actually speak what it is that you truly know in the easiest way. And it's just such an easier, more authentic way to actually get content out versus I have to write it out, which a lot of people have friction to. I would actually implore people to actually write essays if they can. It's something that I'm trying to do myself. It's very hard. It's very hard to sit down and write. That's why I prefer speaking. But if you do this, what I do believe is that it captures the soul of what you're trying to say. And I think most of us are naturally speakers than writers, particularly when, a lot of us are, getting, AI to write emails for us. We're getting AI to respond to emails. We're getting AI to respond and message people in all ways, shapes, or form. And so this here, I think, if you want to start moving towards a more authentic, unique place in writing your content, trying to speak it is, I think, just a very much an easier way to start than any other way, in my opinion. And what I do personally, like if we look at the tools, is I use Whisperflow, I use voice memos, and I really just treat AI as my editor. I don't treat AI as my create like my as a replacement as me as the creator. I think what's important as well is if you're going to go through this like process of like speaking, not typing, is you want to make sure that if you use Claude or GPT, that it doesn't add its own style, but it doesn't add context and it doesn't add its own style. It's purely just basically, I would say, consolidating what you've said into like a nicer format that's still uniquely you and not adding any words or any styles that isn't you. So you can prompt Claude like that. It's just you usually have to just be very specific when you do that. Insight 4, which I think is slowly becoming, I think Insight 4 of creating raw and documented content. I would say that raw and documented content, I think, has come as a consequence of a lot of like AI, or I think it's come as a consequence of the use of AI in content. And what I mean by that is that I think the popularity of yapping, the popularity of raw long form content, I think the popularity of also Substack as a platform, which is like a writers only, writers first platform. I think the rise of these platforms, which are, I think, very authentic and raw in general, is a consequence and a reaction to the use of AI in content itself. And so really, if you wanted to start to allow yourself to express yourself more authentically, be able to create content that is uniquely you, that expresses you a lot more, I think what you would want to do is you want to start making content that is long form, that is raw. It's like long form essays that you can write. And really, it's a true expression of yourself. And I think the way that this works is that by simplifying the creation process, right, doing anti-edit, doing long form raw like this, where if I make a mistake or if I hiccup, it's like, fuck it, that's the way it is. We have to keep rolling. the beauty of it is that you kind of get to see the person as themselves in the most authentic way that they are. And I think by simplifying that creation process, it kind of gives life to that. And so, really, if you're wanting to do this, I think what's really cool is if you can do these long form videos, long form raw content, and then you can clip them for short form, right? You'll see me that I'll clip a lot of this for short form, is that people get to see you in your most raw form. They get to see you in your most raw self, which I think is like a really beautiful thing. And I think it just like harbors this more trust, it harbors more authenticity. And I think it's a better way to do it. And I think what's really the cool thing as well, and I talked about it a little bit down here, is that when you move from content that is like created, edited, highly scripted, which I think a lot of people have sort of like learned to do with the dawn of AI and teleprompters and all this sort of stuff, is that when you do content like this, long form, highly technical, trying to get deep in the details, or you do documented content, which is where you're basically demonstrating live, working with someone one on one, it becomes a oral examination. And what I mean by that is that people get to see if how good you are is actually true. They also get to know really in the moment how competent you are and can you answer questions live, particularly if you're doing that, one-to-one documented content. Documented content is where, you're sitting there, you might have a client, it can be coaching call recordings. I think there's someone on Instagram that I've seen it's absolutely fucking amazing where he's basically just clipping coaching calls recordings and putting them like Zoom call recordings and then putting them up with a caption. And I think the beautiful part there is people get to see him in this most raw format, which I think is like the best part. And so really with raw and documented content, if you can just stick to raw long form, technical explanations of what you know, or you can clip or take raw long form one-to-one you live helping clients and then clipping that and putting it onto Instagram from YouTube to Instagram or from the raw clippings onto YouTube or however you want to do it. Again, number one, it's an oral examination. People get to see you live and they can tell if you actually know your stuff. And two, from what I've seen and working at Founder West and seeing basically when you look at the highest revenue formats and what inherently has generated the most revenue from what I've seen in my previous experience is that the formats that generated the most revenue are the ones where it was people explaining ideas in long form, raw formats, or it was these helping, explaining, demonstrating value live in a one-to-one format or in a mastermind format that was clipped and shown. And I think these are the formats that people love, particularly sophisticated buyers, because sophisticated buyers want to know that the person that they're buying into, the thing that they're going to be giving money to, is really has expertise and can demonstrate their expertise live. And it really gives them almost like I would say, a phantom feeling of what it's like to work with you. And so I think that is an amazing thing to start doing if you really want to start creating content that separates yourself, allows you to be authentically you and demonstrate your value and your expertise, and stand against what I would believe is just very I would say non-documented content, highly edited, scripted content that people struggle to trust because it feels very performative. And so that's one part, or that's really Insight 4. Insight 5, I think, is my favorite. This is something I promote personally. And I think this is also really where, in building a personal brand, I think building a world stands in meta against building a world. And what I mean by this is that building a personal brand, I think, is really just like building viewership, but like building a world is like building super fans. And like you're trying to build like a Star Wars, you're trying to build a Disney, you're trying to build kind of like like Toy Story. I went and saw it the other night. It's an amazing fucking movie. I love Toy Story. I didn't realize it was like 30 years since the last one came out or something. I think that's what it was. I was like, oh my God, I'm getting so fucking old. But the point is that when you're building a world, right, it's like content alone will build you the personal brand, but you want to build a body of work. You want to build a philosophy. You want to build a collection of ideas and values and beliefs into your content, into your personal brand, because that is what will get people to resonate with you. It's what gets people to share the same beliefs and same values. And it's what will get people to basically pay you more money than they would someone else. Because when you hold you plus someone else in same, like if you hold two people, two coaches, consultants, creators, whatever it may be, selling the same service, the one that's able to build a world, that's building a body of work, that's building values and ideas into their content and what they believe that resonates with the viewer, versus I'm just teaching some stuff and I hope the viewer really likes it, is this person that will succeed. And the way you do that is by building a world for them. And so the way that you can then take this a little bit further versus like building a collection of ideas and body of work and these sort of things is that you want to take a stance of the market. You want to name your terms. You want to take your beliefs and put them into structured ideas, right? And creating your own named concept. So for example, with mine is like, I've got small by design. I have the tiny champagne bar model. I've got guided by values, profitable world building, demonstrate, don't tell. Like these are things that I communicate in my content that I want to be unique mechanisms in towards helping people get outcomes. And even to like take it a step further, because we've got it here, is that if you use your named ideas, your mechanisms, and you start to name them and give that the reason that people are able to solve their problems, that's when you start to create this connection, this separateness in your content versus other people. So what I mean by this is that if I say, hey, you can't get client or I can't get clients from my content, then my solution would be that's because you haven't built a world for them to enter. Or let's say someone says, I want more profits in my business, then I would say, well, that's because you need to build it small by design. Versus maybe someone might say, oh, you need to let's say, reduce your content spend, increase ad spend, get a higher ROAS, and double your prices to basically get more profits. It's like that just stands antithesis to maybe my way, because my way is unique and it's a reflection of what I believe, and someone else might share that belief. And so really what you're doing all in all is that you're creating intellectual IP. And the beautiful thing about this is that AI can't copy it, no one else can copy it, and it just stands against very generic commoditized AI content, or really generic commoditized content in general. And so the cool thing here is that people can copy information, but they can't copy your philosophy. They can't copy the body of work, right? They can't copy your stance on the world. They can't copy your terms. And, in my world, if you're listening to this and you're a coach consultant, and maybe there's others out there as well that aren't watching, it's like I'm in a market of people that say, hey, I'll grow your business, right? Everyone's selling the same outcomes. Everyone's saying the same things, right? It's like, hey, you got to work on your offer. You got to work on your conversions. You got to have this profile funnel or this secret funnel, whatever the fuck it is. My way of entering that market is I'm trying to get people to buy into a philosophy, right? And my philosophy is the simple profits philosophy. And I believe that if I carve out a philosophy for people that are based on my beliefs and my values, I'll get that to resonate with others. And therefore I will attract people that want to do that resonate with what I like. And I will repel people that don't necessarily resonate with what I like. And that's inherently the whole entire point. And so really, to build a world, all you're essentially doing is you're trying to build a body of work, you're trying to name it, you're trying to give it a name, you're trying to add terms, you're trying to use those terms as solution to people's problems. And then what you're also doing is then you're trying to create an intellectual IP that other people can't copy, right? Because someone might say, hey, if you can't get clients, all you need to do is post more content or whatever the fuck the answers are these days. It's like, no, it's like actually you need to build a world. Building a world is very much different to building a personal brand. Building a world is very much different than just posting content a specific way. So that's another way that you can start to differentiate. The last one, this is the fun one, become a defensible character. We kind of went through this. This is actually, I would say, the most important one. So I will leave this here and you can actually go through it, right? The main perspective here is that the person who says the content is more important than what the content is. And what I mean by that is that at the end of the day, because AI has commoditized information in general, everyone can say the same thing. So really the defining factor isn't so much the content itself, but it's the person who says it. And so, really, if you want to essentially stand out and basically be not just like a knowledgeable, boring person, as I've seen before, but a person worth following, it's like a person worth following usually stands for something. And so, if you were wanting to basically build a defensible character or a character that is different, that's unique, that everyone else can actually like attach to, I think a defensible character or a unique character is also a character that people build parasocial relationships with, right? Parasocial is when, people have a observed, I wouldn't say observed, but like a connection with someone that they themselves don't know that they exist. It's kind of this it's this phenomena that's happened in social media, but also through like tele and media and television, where you might have this massive obsession with an actor, but the actor doesn't know that you exist. It's like the way that you can create that in your personal brand is that you want to start building a character on like four components. And those four components are, you want to have a unique thesis, philosophy, or vision for you, yourself, your audience. You want to be able to then communicate your values and beliefs, which was spoken about a lot. And the reason you want to communicate your values and beliefs, I've said this more than once in this video, is that you're doing this in the hope of the idea that your beliefs cross over with the beliefs of the market and are therefore communicated and manifested in your product, right? Because this is what helps people gravitate towards you. And so just as a quick little thing, like I've got clients first, profits, family over work, seasonal work calendar, simplicity. These are things that I try to communicate in my content. Because if people resonate with those things, they'll also resonate with me. And then the other thing is that you want to stand against something. You want to stand against the meta. So you want to ask yourself, well, what is it that you disagree with the market on? What is it you hate about the market? Who is the enemy? For me, it's like scale and complexity and all the different things, right? These are primarily just examples that I put down. But if you're yourself thinking about, well, what could it be for me? Then you can ask yourself those questions. And then the last one is imperfections, right? You want to show up on camera in the most non-performative way possible. It's sometimes fucking hard, just like if you're getting started or even if you are used to creating content. Like content is sometimes it is a performative art in general, but I think it is an art in of itself to show up as most authentically as you can. And sometimes that is a skill. Like I tried to do it in this video, and it's really fucking hard because you don't know how many times people are going to look at you on the internet and see what you're saying and everything like this. But I think the thing that I try to convey as much as I possibly can when I do these videos is I just try to get people to maybe get an experience of what it's like to sit with me and talk with me live, as if they were with me and I was helping them. So that part there of showing your imperfections, it's like you just want to be raw and you want to be yourself. I mean, that's the most beautiful part. At the end of the day, there will never be another you. When you look at the dawn of history all the way back to the billions of people, the millions of people that lived, no matter how similar you think someone is in your life or in your family tree or whatever it is, no one at the DNA genetic level will be like you. And I think that is the greatest, most important thing. Even when you start creating your personal brand, your presence, your offers, everything is like no one can copy you. And so if you let that flow through into your brand, into your presence, no one, not even AI can copy that. And I think that is the most beautiful part, because then it's also what you'll find the most successful creators, coaches, or just people who create content have, is that they have that unique voice. And I think a way of drawing that self out of you is thinking about what is your vision for everyone? What is, your values and beliefs? What is your hates and antithesis on the market? And then just being yourself. And I think that's like the most beautiful part. And so back here, like just to kind of like, round this out, is when you look at like the unique thesis and the philosophy, you know, you want to have a take on the market. So mine personally is like, coaching, education, consulting businesses should be simple, calm, and extremely profitable. And the way that that happens is small by design, high profit, guided by values, clients first, built on ecosystems, and world building. And I do that through the simple profits philosophy. If you go look at like my previous employer, best way to grow a business is a personal brand, Claude to be helpful, useful, and harmless, Danco to help future-proof people. These are missions for the content, they're missions for the brand. And I think it's also they have unique takes on the market. And I think if you can create that, it's the best thing to do. And so really, that's the last insight, which is build a defensible character. And I think the most important thing is the values and beliefs. To reiterate this, I was reading, a piece of marketing material on the internet for actually this fucking teacup. This teacup costs like $50. Um, I think it's this one. I actually don't know. There's one I spent $50 on. The reason I bought it is because it told me how it was created, how it was crafted by this certain gentleman in this certain part of, I can't remember, in Australia somewhere. And I thought that was very cool because I myself, I resonate with mastery and craftsmanship. And so, I spent $50 on a teacup because I really just resonate with the values and the beliefs of craftsmanship, care, and being really like attention to detail. Right? I'm just gullible person who spent $50 on a teacup because someone showed me that they've also valued what I valued. And so I think that's like as important in your brand as anything as well. And so, what do you actually do? The recap. Well, creation is sacred. You really want to turn, creating content into not a systematic one, but a creative one. I think that's important. You want to tell stories only you can tell. You want to speak it, don't type it, because the barrier to entry to now creating content is lower since we now have these tools. But if you want to stand out, allow yourself to speak it, go on a walk, take voice memos. It's the best thing ever. You want to tap into raw and documented content. So you want to do long form explanations, anti-edit, no edits, allows people to authentically see you. You can clip them up, distribute them on short form platforms. It's a very useful way of doing it. You want to build a world, right? Name your terms, market ideas, get your IP in order so that people can resonate with you in certain terms. And then you also want to build your defensible character, right? You want to build a character that people can attach themselves to and that people can resonate with. Because if you have no character and you're just a personality on the internet talking how-tos and teaching frameworks, and you have no character, no personality, no nothing, you will just be a competent, boring face on the internet that no one cares about, kind of like a dictionary. So to end this off, I'm going to put this whole doc in the description because you can actually go take it and use it. If you want to read, I actually wrote a manifesto just personally on my own, perspective. So if you're a coach, consultant, creator, expert, and you kind of want to see the way I think and how I think about growing simple, calm, and extremely profitable coaching businesses, you can go read my manifesto. I took a bit of time there. It's really an expression of everything I think, and it was written as actually a rejection to the current state of the market. So if you read that, you'll really enjoy it. And if you want notes and ideas and video essays and you just want to hear from me more often, I've also got a newsletter, which you can join. And you can check it out because it's on Substack, so you can actually just go see everything I've written before. But otherwise, that's it for today. If you're still here watching, appreciate it. But otherwise, I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.